Hello there, everybody. Let's take a brief look at the astrology of March 2025 and see what's in store. It's a pretty interesting astrological month with some very rare occurrences and equally some slightly less than rare occurrences that happen every once in a while but don't happen very often. Let's start with that one first, which is we're going to have several planets transiting through a section of the sky called Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra. Now, I know there are some of you who are not familiar with what nakshatras are. We'll get to that here in a moment and what Uttara Bhadrapada specifically is all about. But just to give you a little bit more of a summary of what's going on in March, we also are going to have both Venus and Mercury retrograde for the entire month of March. Now, Venus will go retrograde earlier on in the month, and it will be in a section of the sky called Revati Nakshatra, and then eventually backtracking into Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra. And Mercury will be transiting through Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra, and then it's going to be, he's looking over at his notes here, and then it's going to be stationing in Revati Nakshatra. More on that here in a moment as well, before it backtracks its way through Revati and again Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra. Now, Venus is going to go retrograde, station retrograde, on the 2nd of the month, and Mercury is going to station retrograde on the 15th, a day after we have a total lunar eclipse, which will be taking place in Uttara Falguni Nakshatra. Right? We'll go over all these nakshatra things here in a moment because I know there's some of you who are not familiar with the world of nakshatras. So in addition to that, we're also going to have at the end of the month Neptune changing signs. So first of all, on the eclipses, we're going to have the total lunar eclipse on the 14th, and then we're going to have a partial solar eclipse on the 29th, and then ending the month off, we're going to have Neptune entering the sign of Aries. Now that's big news because Neptune only really changes signs like every 13 and roughly 13 and a half years. So Neptune has been in the sign of Pisces, which is its home for quite a long time now. So this is quite a momentous shift. Let's talk about this Uttara Bhadrapada energy. And first of all, let's talk about nakshatras for those of you who may not be familiar with what nakshatras are. Nakshatras are another division of the sky. They're a division of something called the stellar sphere. And nakshatras basically are 13 degrees and 20 minutes each. And they're similar, but not exactly like signs. They condition a planet, and equally, they're very profound in their symbolism. And quite often, their symbolism will manifest when that planet is transiting through the sign in a more precise and I guess the word I want to use, powerful and symbolic way, right? So, for instance, you might find yourself thinking about rivers a lot, which are a very Uttara Bhadrapada thing, right? You might have a desire to walk by rivers, but we're not going to go into all of that stuff. I'm just trying to give you a general idea of like what nakshatras are about. They're really powerful and they're very profound. So what about Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra? Well, what does that mean, first of all? Uttara Bhadrapada means the latter lucky feet. And what kind of a lucky feet are these latter lucky feet? Okay. Well, it's going to sound really morbid, but they're the feet of a funeral cot, right? And most of us don't think of that as being something that's fortunate, but it's the concept of the final resting place before liberation. The nakshatras start with Ashwini nakshatra, which is divine potential splintering off and coming into a state of dualism. What's beginning to happen, or what's taking place, I should say, with Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra is the reintegration of that duality. With Purva Bhadrapada, right before Uttara Bhadrapada, and Uttara Bhadrapada, one meaning Purva meaning former, Uttara meaning latter, there's this deep reintegration of the shadow self. There's this connection of understanding the light and the dark in all individuals, right? And because of that, Uttara Bhadrapada can have a very humanitarian nature to it because it understands that there's this dualism that exists within each and every one of us. Some key themes to look at when planets are transiting through Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra is the concept of repressed desires. Sometimes we desire something and are either not able to have it or don't allow ourselves to have it. And what ends up happening is eventually over time, we repress those desires almost to the level that we're not aware that they exist. But what ends up happening is they kind of operate in the background, kind of subconsciously propelling us to do certain things that then make it seem like we're kind of working against ourselves. And so, hence, we have the reintegration of the two sides and some themes that generally happen with Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra are discovering sides of yourself that you didn't know that you had, or discovering things about another person that you didn't know were really going on. In either instance, it has a revelatory nature. When it's with another person, sometimes it can be shocking or something that we don't want to know about the person. And, eventually it can lead to us going, okay, well, I guess I have a shadow side too, so I should take a look at that. And these are some of the ways that Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra work. So, what about Revati Nakshatra, which is where Venus and Mercury are going to be going through part of their retrograde motion in the month of March? Revati is the final nakshatra. It's the liberation, but it's also the void between two different periods of existence, right? We're surrendering to the understanding that we're not really this dualistic being. We're surrendering to the divine within each and every one of us, and we're letting go. But when we let go, there's also a need to have trust and to have faith and have hope because we spend most of our lives in an egoic state of existence, right? And so when we're trying to trust in the fact that we're, a spirit and a soul also, well, initially that's not so easy. We kind of, get caught up in survival mentality, thinking that things are not going to go well unless we're somehow involved with pushing the buttons a little bit. And there are themes with that with Revati Nakshatra. There's one part surrender and one part going, I'm not really sure about this. And there's a tendency to somewhat partially accept but equally assert oneself against the things that one is not necessarily happy about. And there's quite often a theme with Revati Nakshatra of development and being in a state of limbo, like waiting for something else to happen. So some of you might find yourselves in positions where different areas of your life are in a state of limbo. You're kind of waiting for things to change, but they're not quite there yet. So, how about these eclipse cycles, right? So, the lunar eclipse is going to be taking place in Uttara Falguni Nakshatra, and the solar eclipse at the end of the month taking place in Revati Nakshatra, which we just spoke about. But let's talk a little bit about Uttara Falguni Nakshatra. Just like there's a Purva Bhadrapada and an Uttara Bhadrapada, there's a Purva Falguni and an Uttara Falguni. Purva Falguni and Uttara Falguni are the coming together and the consummation of the divine relationship. Now, sometimes when there are key things happening in these nakshatras, relationships will take special prominence during these times. But one of the things that it's reflecting is our own relationship with self or with soul or with spirit, right? And how we, get caught, I guess I want to say, in this state of egoic existence. Which we've touched on that theme. We were talking about the reintegration with the Bhadrapadas. With the Purva Falguni and Uttara Falguni, there's the coming together and the recognition of, hey, I'm both this and I'm this, right? But the level of trust is less. Okay, there's less of a trust in spirit because the Purva Falguni and Uttara Falguni are what are called tamasic nakshatras. So they're stuck in a state of darkness more so. So tamasic nakshatra is the beginning of the exploration of that realm of spirit which exists within us. But there's a laziness connected to it. There's a reluctance. There's, a desire to kind of keep things static, right? Because again, there's less of a sense of trust. With Uttara Falguni, there's the need to be brave, the need to be strong, and the need to overcome that resistance to unite with oneself. Now, on the external level, in terms of relationships, Purva Falguni is like the formation of the relationship. Uttara Falguni relates to how we benefit from a relationship. So you may find some relationship themes taking key prominence in March, looking at how you benefit from particular connections. But equally, there's a whole level of you needing to recognize where you need to be more assertive, where you need to stand your ground, and where you need to have greater levels of courage. And as I mentioned, we've got good old dreamy, imaginative, confusing, illusionary, and doubtful Neptune beginning to transit through the sign of Aries, dipping its toes into Aries. I think it's between don't quote me on this. I think it's between like late March and October, and then it will regress back into Pisces. But some key things to look at over the course of the next several months with Neptune's transit through Aries are the themes of not being certain where a particular path is going, wanting to assert oneself, but maybe feeling reluctant because you're not sure if you're being prone to fits of fantasy or if you can trust your imagination. Those are key themes too. Creative visioning, but kind of going, yeah, but I'm just going to keep that in the realm of vision, right? Until we begin to explore new ways of existence. There's a very pioneering spirit to Neptune and Aries, which we're likely going to see over the course of the next 13 years, but we're just beginning to explore that at the end of March. And that will be transiting through Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra at that time. So deep revelations with Neptune's transit through Uttara Bhadrapada lead to even greater exploration of new ways forward. So thanks a lot for watching this. We're going to move on. For those of you who are watching this in as an intro into your personal horoscopes, we're going to get into those now. Aries, you're quite renowned for being a good starter. You're really good at being that spark that comes into any project and really gets things rolling along, but perhaps not being such a good finisher. But that's not necessarily true because when you're really passionate about something, then your determination can really be very dogged to the extent that you absolutely positively won't let go. And then when it's time to let go of something or of someone, it becomes very difficult to, well, for lack of a better way to put it, to become the warrior that's got to retire to the garden because you've identified yourself with that struggle for such a long period of time. And March may find you at the beginning of the month feeling as if a lot of the past was you in a situation where you were living a lie, we have several planets that are transiting through your house of the past, your house of the subconscious mind, the 12th house at the beginning of the month. And yes, a lot of them are going to pass over good old dreamy and fantastic Neptune before Neptune shifts into your sign at the end of the month. And it's got you reviewing the past and looking at it in a new lens with new aspects of what was really going on being revealed to you over the course of time. But don't feel as if you've somehow, been duped or as if the energy that you were putting into a certain area of your life somehow wasn't making a difference. You weren't living a lie. All the energy and the effort that you put forward is absolutely positively not lost. It's just that you needed to be connected to that realm of your life for a very specific reason. And now, on a certain level, it's time to move on. And you're likely going to find yourself in a position where you're also looking at a relationship in a new way. And either that relationship is either going to completely move on to or take on a new a new life, right? Which that newness can be nothing but positive. But the problem is you became very deeply identified with what you were getting involved in. And so it's got you in a space where little bit by little bit, you're going to need to kind of cut the cords. We don't like doing that. Cutting the cords is, it's especially if you're a sensitive Aries, cut like, with Venus and Pisces or something like that. Cutting those cords can be a little bit difficult because one part of you knows that you need to do it, and the other part goes, this is going to completely change things. And that change can be confusing and it can be really unsettling and it can be chaotic. But that is what gives birth to creativity. It's what allows something new to unfold in the wake of something that once was. And March is giving you a very rare opportunity to begin to reinvent yourself. And as you go through that process, there's likely going to be some things that are coming to the surface that you've actually been taking over the course of, even maybe as far as the last decade that you've just been repressing beneath the surface. Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra has a funny way of doing that because Uttara Bhadrapada is the side that we're aware of and our shadow side meeting each other in the middle. And so we have a tendency to repress a lot of our desires or a lot of the things that we're prone to doing but recognize that we can't do in certain situations. Uttara Bhadrapada makes us recognize that and realize that and look at that. And a lot of those are going to come out to play. And with some of them, you're going to go, I don't want to play with you anymore. But with a lot of them, it's going to be like re-welcoming an old friend that you haven't seen in a very long time. We've got a solar eclipse in your sign at the end of the month and in Revati Nakshatra. So it's likely going to feel to you as you reach that time that there's a lot of your life that's in limbo. Don't see that as being unsettling. See it as a very rare opportunity, which indeed it is. Take advantage of it. This is a necessary stage for your future development. Hello there, Taurus, and welcome to your March 2025 horoscope. So sometimes we get kind of tricked into thinking certain ways in life, right? So, if we are going in a particular direction and we meet with some resistance because our psyche doesn't like the concept of resistance, we automatically think if there's resistance, I must be going in the wrong way. And by a similar token, when things are flowing easily, we seem to think, I must be going in the right way. But right way and wrong way have absolutely nothing to do with resistance and whether or not things are easy. And I think that's something that you really need to take in and digest in terms of March Taurus if you haven't already. Because you see, you have a particular idea. And this idea is really inspiring to you. It gives you a lot of, I guess the phrase I would use is juice. You get really juiced up about it. You're inspired by it. And you sense that you might actually be able to take this particular inspired idea and turn it into something that can both be helpful to other people and equally help you to make perhaps a little bit of cash on the side or maybe right up front as well. Okay. So you've been beginning to develop it over recent weeks, and now you might be hitting a little bit of resistance to your plans. So, one level of that resistance might have something to do with things being vague. Because at the beginning of the month, we're going to have Mercury crossing over Neptune. Mercury is responsible for that idea, whatever that idea might be about in your life. Mercury is responsible for that idea. And so when you hit that resistance, you're going, hey, this is really great. And I kind of get the broad picture, but it's still a little bit blurry. And if I'm going to put this blurry concept out there to other people, sure, other people might go, that sounds interesting, but tell me more. And if I'm kind of stuck in that space of going, well, you want me to tell you more, but I can't really tell you more right now. And it doesn't really feel to you like it's going to be going anywhere. You've been putting a lot of effort and energy into developing this particular concept. And at the end of the day, what you're beginning to feel is even though a lot is going in, you're not really getting quite as much out of the situation as you had hoped for. And that is placing you in that position where you're going, is this going in the right direction? Is this really something that's going to gain momentum? Is this something that's going to be worthwhile? Or am I going to spend the next several years of my life like some hamster on a giant treadmill going round and round in circles and not really getting anywhere? Let me ask you a question though. Is that hamster going round and round in circles? Is he having a good time? Yeah. Is he feeling that it's worthwhile having a good time? Does that hamster know that eventually he can get off the treadmill and maybe go over and have a little bit of food, which is going to be the payment for going round and round in circles on that treadmill? Well, you have to ask yourself, what's the hurry? Sometimes slow and steady wins the race much more so than things at a fast and hurried pace. You sense in terms of going in this direction, if you really want to make it a reality, then you might have to enlist some assistance in order to be able to do so. And doing that is something that you're going, yeah, but if I do that, am I just going to be left with a lot of debt and then a lot of things that are just making me get further dug into a hole? You see, towards the end of the month, we've got a solar eclipse taking place in your 12th house, involving the lords of both expression and stability in that particular area of your chart. And this is taking place right before Neptune shifts into your 12th house as well. And it's likely going to cause you to think, is this just my imagination? Is this just a dream? Or is this something that can become a reality? You're reconsidering whether this creative venture is worth you putting quite so much energy into. At the end of the day, you have to answer that for yourself. But I would say to take into consideration the concepts of sometimes it takes a while to create something worthwhile. Sometimes resistance is something that helps you to kind of refine something. So don't take any obstruction that you might be experiencing as something that's saying no go. Instead, understand it might be something that's going to eventually help you to fly high. Let's see what the month of March holds in store for you, Gemini. How many of you have ever seen the tarot card, the Fool? In more traditional ways, it's usually presented as a person walking along with a stick over his shoulder, with a bag hanging off the back of it, basically without a care in the world. There's usually a dog there with him, kind of trotting along by his side, and he's about to step off the edge of a precipice. But the look on his face is one of just being completely carefree without a worry in the world. So we have to ask ourselves with this fool, is this fool a fool at all? Or is the fool perhaps wise? Does the fool perhaps know that bogging your mind down with all the worries and concerns of the world is really just going to mean that you're walking along with something much heavier than a small bag on the edge of a stick? You're going to have tons of baggage that you're carrying with you, and you're always going to be thinking about that next step, worrying about it, rather than just, kind of walking along and going, oh, here's what's happening and here's how I respond to it. So let me ask you this on another level. Is there a very fine line, perhaps, between the concepts of creative manifestation or creative visualization and just being in a complete fit of fantasy? And that's something that you need to ask yourself, not because you're getting ready to step off the edge of the cliff, but you need to kind of check in with yourself about crossing that line. I mean, really, on a certain level, if you want your life to be more exciting, right, how can you ever expect it to get to that point if you don't take some chances? If you don't have those fits of fantasy and entertain them as being creative visualization or creative manifestation. And let's face it, this is likely something that's taking place for you on the work front. And you likely have quite a few people who have been kind of crossing lines, so to speak, on the work front in relation to your boundaries. And due to this, you're likely going, you know what? I'm not going to use a curse word, but you're going, beep this. I'm just taking things in a completely wildly new direction. And as you begin to explore, you can either let the resistance that you're facing as you're exploring make you feel like, oh my God, this isn't safe and I need to turn around. Or instead, you can go, maybe I just need to take my ideas and refine them a little bit further. And sometimes when you face that resistance or begin to explore and you hit that opposition, it can feel really scary. But more and more, when you handle it and when you take care of the business that's on your plate right in front of you, you begin to develop greater and greater levels of self-trust. So as we reach the end of the month, Venus is going to be aligning harmoniously with Pluto in a section of the sky called Shravana. Shravana is symbolized by the ears, and you're likely going to find yourself having a hunch or two, an intuition or three that's going, maybe that's a little bit too wild of an idea. But even though these ideas may seem a little bit unpolished, with development, their potential can be absolutely profound. Hello, Cancer. Welcome to your March 2025 horoscope. So sometimes we find ourselves in completely unknown territory. And even though the landscape that we're looking at can seem very exciting and filled with great possibility, sometimes we also go, yeah, but look at that forest over there that I might have to go through. I don't know if I want to go through that by myself. And look at that cliff that I might have to kind of do a bit of a rock scramble up. It would be kind of nice if there was somebody there that had my back a little bit. But then you look around you and you find it's just you and that landscape. What are you going to do then? Are you going to turn around and go back home? Well, you've come this far already, so I'm not sure if I would really recommend that. Or are you going to commit to the journey that lies ahead? You see, you may not have that backup that you feel like you're needing right now. But if you scan the darker recesses of your subconscious, lots of fun, highly recommend it. Kidding, but not about scanning it. So if you scan the darker recesses of your subconscious, you'll find that there's a memory there, a hunch that goes, somehow, I always knew I was going to end up here. So why become reluctant? You knew this was something that you were going to confront. Sure, it would be nice if you could just phone a friend and ask for their input on it so that you can have the validation that you feel like you need before you move forward. But here's the thing about phoning other people or contacting other people or asking other people their opinion on things like that. And yes, even with astrologers, everybody has their own personal agenda. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. We're all different people, as a matter of fact. So, everybody also, even agendas aside, everybody's going to have their own ideas about that situation. To put it quite simply, they're not you. Only you are you. And I think the things that you have to kind of look at in relation to this situation is this a direction that inspires you? Is this a direction that you feel like there's a lot of purpose and meaning for you if you go in this direction? Is this a direction that makes you kind of look at things and go, you know what? This is something that's gonna bring a lot of not only inner enrichment to my life, but yes, maybe even potential like material enrichment. Towards the end of the month, we've got a solar eclipse that's taking place in your 10th house. It's asking you to have a little more self-esteem in regards to whatever is developing on that fresh landscape that's in front of you. Now, whatever might those potential things developing on your personal landscape may be, that's going to be determined by the other placements in your horoscope. But in looking at that, you're needing to ask yourself, is this meaningful? Does this bring greater enrichment? Is this something that if I summon the confidence and the enthusiasm to go forward, I'm going to be really happy if I did? And I know you're probably kind of looking at it and going, yeah, but that's precisely the problem. I don't know if it's going to do those things. But again, back to the very first thing. Is this something that really kind of, for lack of a better way to put it, melts your butter and makes it feel to you like, wow, look at that. That would be really great if only I had the confidence to go in that particular direction. So here's the thing, you can always take that first step and then another. It's okay to keep things flexible for now. For those of you who are exploring new career opportunities, because that's another thing for you, Cancer, is there's potentially quite a lot of you that are exploring new career opportunities. Going in that direction, you may sense, is going to require you to take on greater responsibility. In either instance, please do know that it's okay to take your time to consider whether this is something you want to move forward with, whether this is you just exploring something that's inspiring to you or new territory without somebody else to give you the support that you need, or whether it's actual new career opportunities. As I mentioned, you may sense it's asking you to take on greater responsibility. You don't have to decide immediately. You can take your time. You have the capacity to do so. But please do keep in mind that the only thing that's really holding you back at this particular moment in time is you having confidence in your decisions. Here's your horoscope for March 2025, Leo. Sometimes we have relationships that become somewhat of a relationship of convenience. And, people like to talk about connections like that and go, well, those aren't really fair connections because, one person's just using the other. But occasionally there are situations where people recognize that they're both able to be of use to each other, but they equally recognize that there are certain aspects of the other person that they need to keep at arm's length, and sometimes maybe even a little bit more depending upon how the person smells. But we're not going to go there because this has nothing to do with smell. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with being advantageous about a relationship of convenience as long as you both understand the rules of the road. But over the course of March, you're likely going to find with a particular connection that you've been, well, kind of exploring the benefits of. And I'm not saying this is necessarily an intimate relationship. It doesn't bar intimate relationships either, though. But as you're trying to explain a few ideas to this individual, you start kind of recognizing something about their personality that makes you feel a little bit doubtful about the person. You may even think that this person might be talking about you behind your back, as we're going to have a few planets interacting with Pluto and Shravana over the course of the month that relates to the ear. And this is taking place in your second house, the house of self-esteem, but equally the house of finances. So they might be making words about you behind your back in regards to this. But here's what really matters most. We can get caught up in that. We can get frustrated about it. We can even think on a certain level that that's going to somehow harm us. And the more you feed into that particular energy and the more you let yourself become insecure and, yes, even perhaps somewhat defensive of what's being said, sometimes the worse it becomes. So, since you don't really know for sure that that's what's going on, why even go there? Why explore it or why get too caught up in it? Because as we're able to see with this particular connection, this is a situation where both individuals are able to basically serve each other's agendas. Now, towards the middle of the month, there may be some tensions that arise, but if you recognize on a certain level that your particular journey, and I've been discussing this, in a lot of the horoscopes in recent periods, for you, Leo, I should say, if you recognize that this is a connection that can actually serve you going forward, and this is also something that's going to be able to serve them, then this can be a particular connection that's really helpful for you. We have mid-month a lunar eclipse in your second house, and it's in a section of the sky that's called Uttara Falguni. Uttara Falguni relates to how we benefit from connecting with ourselves. So you'll likely find the more secure and stable you are within yourself, the more you'll benefit, and the more secure and stable you are in understanding that, hey, this is a beneficial connection, but it's also a connection that I need to kind of, keep at an arm's length in order for it to work well. Then when we reach the period of the solar eclipse at the end of March, you're likely going to find a lot starts moving along for you. And these are things that are moving along, particularly in connection with this other individual. And they can actually help you to sort through the confusion at that particular time. So this is somebody you want to keep around, at least for now, but maybe it's time to rediscuss the rules of where you two are coming together, where the boundaries lie, and the meaning of this particular connection. Welcome, Virgo, to your March 2025 horoscope. Everybody who understands basic gardening 101 knows that sometimes you have to prune things back in order for new growth to take place. Because where certain things are beginning to fall apart, if we divert too much energy and too much attention to those particular areas, it's only going to sap us of the inspiration, the vitality, and the energy that we need to grow in a positive direction. Don't worry, you haven't accidentally tuned into the botany channel. This is still the astrology channel, but it's a very apt way of looking at things for you, Virgo, especially for the month of March. You're likely going to find yourself in a position where you're re-examining partnerships of all types. There's a lot of activity going on in your house of relationships, and equally the area of your chart that shows how you benefit from partnerships, which is the eighth house. And so you're likely to find that a lot of your relationships are going to undergo a transformation within the month of March. We also are going to have a lunar eclipse in your sign that's going to place you in a position where you're likely looking at yourself in relevance to a lot of the communities and cliques that you're involved in, and deciding that, well, there may be a few of those collectives, communities, etc., that I'm devoting a lot of attention to that maybe are not really worthy of my attention. Maybe I'm putting too much energy and resources in those particular areas. Maybe you feel like you're trying to share something with the group, and a lot of what you're trying to express is kind of falling on deaf ears. You've got the South Node transiting your sign for about the next year and a half. It's likely going to cause you to take a look at yourself and how you put yourself out there for other people in such a way that may place you in a position where you're either too self-controlled and not saying the things that you really want to say, or you're putting too much energy into situations for the sake of other people and leaving yourself in a position where you're more depleted. March is likely causing you to take a look at the latter. You may be concerned, as I was saying, that a lot of what you're speaking or saying to specific groups of people, or maybe even one person, is falling on deaf ears. You may feel like there are people that you're maintaining a connection with, but you're really in a space of doing it as a relationship of convenience, and you don't really feel like it's an authentic relationship, or that people are being upfront with you, because you're beginning to recognize that it's quite often less what people are saying to you and more about what they're revealing to you through your body language. Being the type of person who is analytical, you know you're analytical, and so you're maybe thinking, well, maybe I'm being a little too judgmental of these other people. And I'm not going to tell you to be, I'm not trying to tell you to be paranoid or overly suspicious, but don't be afraid to listen to your hunches. Sometimes there's one part of us that knows that something or someone is a certain way, and we tend to ignore wisdom when perhaps we should pay closer attention to what it's bringing to the surface. The eclipse cycle this month, we have, as I mentioned, a total lunar eclipse, which is taking place in Virgo, your sign, in the area of Virgo. Basically, just for people who are watching this, who are familiar with Vedic astrology, I use the tropical zodiac with sidereal nakshatras. So you're going to have the lunar eclipse taking place in Uttara Falguni. Uttara Falguni is very deeply connected to how we benefit from relationships. And then you're going to find the partial solar eclipse at the end of the month taking place in your eighth house, which again is how you benefit from partnerships, but it's in a section of that called Revati Nakshatra. So Revati quite often lets us marks the end of one cycle, I should say, and the beginning of the next cycle has not quite come into being. It's like being in a state of limbo where lots in development, but you don't fully know where things are going. And then we're going to have all of that followed by Neptune shifting into your eighth house. This is going to begin a very mystical time for you, Virgo, for the course of the next 13 or so years, as basically Neptune has been transiting your house of relationships for that time. Now it's going to shift into the area of your chart related to how you benefit from relationships, the occult, the mystical, etc. So those are some of the themes that you're likely going to find coming to the surface. In March, you're likely looking at how you're benefiting from partnerships, how you might need to take care of yourself a little bit better so that you're able to be of service to others. You're beginning to recognize that there are people who don't respect your input. Guess what? You can show them to the door. You don't have to waste your energy and time on people who won't listen. Instead, let your words not fall on deaf ears, but be fruitful to those whom you can serve. Hello, Libra, and welcome to your monthly horoscope for the month of March 2025. I grew up in a household where I had two brothers and two sisters. So I shared a bedroom with both of my brothers, and my brothers didn't really like each other that much. And so there was a piece of tape, quite literally, down the middle of the room that showed one person's side of the room and the other person's side of the room, and they were not allowed to step over that particular boundary. Now, you have to ask yourself, Libra, if somebody has stepped over that boundary in terms of your life. Has someone crossed that line? Has someone pushed you too far? Have you been clear with that boundary? And if you've been clear with that boundary, well, March is the time where things are going to need to be discussed. As you've been taking a deeper look at the concept of conflict and tension and the role that it plays in your life, and equally understanding how you just want to move forward in as stress-free of a manner as you possibly can, but maybe the better thing is to become accustomed to stress so that it doesn't seem like such a big thing for you. And here comes your testing ground. Okay. Here comes the point where you can recognize that, okay, here's that resistance. Here's my boundary. Here's where that's been crossed. Here's that other person standing like right in front of me, sometimes right in my face. What am I going to do about it? Okay. Well, you're going to be clear about where your boundaries lie. You're going to be clear about what is acceptable and what is no longer acceptable. As we approach the total lunar eclipse mid-month, the total lunar eclipse is taking place in Uttara Falguni. Uttara Falguni is a relationship-oriented section of the sky. It deals primarily with us having the courage and strength within us to take particular actions. It also deals at the same time with the benefits that we receive from particular partnerships. And so you're likely recognizing how a lot that is developing in your life is developed off of your own steam, and that's great. That's giving you more expansive levels of confidence. But at the same time, with a particular connection in your life, you're likely recognizing, okay, well, this is a connection that serves me. This is somebody that perhaps you care about. But in either instance, there's a need for the rules to be redefined. A side of another person has been revealed. And even though we all have our shadow side that we're not really aware of and equally not fully aware of how it impacts another person, you're in a position where you could really use a little more light in your life, especially now as you're beginning to understand where you really stand on some important key points. And the last couple of months have trained you to not shy away in the face of necessary confrontation, because there is necessary confrontation and confrontation that is not necessary. But at this particular moment in time, it's important now for you, Libra, to stand for your individuality and your independence. Hello, Scorpio, and welcome to your horoscope for the month of March 2025. My challenge for you in March is dare to go deep. Now, I know that Scorpios usually don't have a problem with that, but dare to go deeper than the depths to which you usually go to. Because there's a need for you within March to be able to find greater and greater levels of confidence in what you ultimately know to be right. You're opening a chapter on, I should say, a new chapter in your life, one that promises to be so much more inspiring to you. But there's a little bit of tension before you go in that particular direction. For some of you, this may manifest in confusion over your vision and the direction that might be best for you to take things. For others, it might have something to do with a situation of shared finances or shared resources and tensions and discussions over that. In either instance, there's something that you need to confront. Maybe somebody else in your life you have been considering as a villain, somebody who is working against you, not the curly mustache type, but just a normal, regular, everyday villain. We all have them in our lives, let's face it, although sometimes that villain ends up being ourselves more so than somebody else. But you're likely going to see this other person in a new light that can help you to really understand and perhaps have a greater level of empathy for that person and recognize the struggles that they ultimately might have been going through in relation to your own independent struggles that you've been experiencing. In either instance, even though it's great to have empathy and understanding for this person, at the same time, the month of March is about you. And it's about what you're going to do next and where you're going to take things. And even though things may seem, well, a little bit foggy, I want you to dare to use your imagination. Because if you tap in, you're likely going to find deep within there are these really powerful hunches you have about what it is that you should do. We're going to have, Mercury and Venus both going retrograde in your house of conflict, debt. Some of you may be dealing with debt and trying to sort through those things as you're shifting into a new phase of existence. But you're likely going to be reviewing conflict or what you owe another person on one level or another in contrast to what you owe yourself. This can interfere with your decision-making capacity if you're not careful. And that's why I'm saying you need to really kind of tune in and tap into yourself and give yourself what you want. I mean, maybe you've been holding yourself back in a particular direction, and I don't want you to hold yourself back anymore. This is about you going deep, really deep. And as we approach the solar eclipse at the end of the month, some of you might be looking for a new line of work or perhaps even considering a creative enterprise or entrepreneurship, perhaps with another individual involved. Don't worry, not the villain type. Only don't make this one the villain, okay? Because this person's on your side. So though the contrast between you and this other person may actually be quite drastic, it's something that can add some color and excitement to things going forward. Hello there, Sagittarius, and welcome to your March 2025 horoscope. So, what I want you to do is to remember back to when you were a child and how, when you behaved in one particular way, it seemed like everybody loved you. You got all the recognition that you could desire. Love was just kind of heaped upon you, more so than you could imagine, right? And then there was that other way that you behaved where people didn't really seem to want to pay attention to you. They didn't want to recognize you. You maybe felt unloved when you behaved in that way. What begins to happen at that time is we begin to kind of course, on one level, understand if I behave this way, then I get what I want. And if I behave in this other way, I don't get what we want. But there's another split that begins to happen because in our minds, when we're experiencing that, we can't grasp the concept that these people who seemingly feel one way about us one moment are then feeling another way about us in the next. So why am I going on about this? Well, it seems like as we progress through March, that a relationship seems to be deepening for you. Now, this is not necessarily an intimate relationship, but for some of you, it likely will be. For those of you who it's not, it's likely going to be a work-related relationship, either if you're involved in an entrepreneurship with a partner or just having to work with another within the workplace. There's a relationship or a connection that's deepening as the month goes on. But what ends up happening when we get into connections and those connections begin to deepen is we begin to feel like it's safe to let those other sides of our being come out to play, right? And it's not like those other sides of our being are bad. We just have come to learn that perhaps that is bad. And, it's not necessarily that it's going to be accepted by the other person. So, what's likely going to happen as we get into the middle of March is as a relationship for you has been deepening, something is likely going to be said that touches on an emotional chord for you. Well, for lack of a better way to put it, it kind of hits your sensitivities. And by the time we reach the solar eclipse at the end of March, you may be looking at this connection and going, maybe it's time to put the brakes on this. Maybe it's better for me to withdraw a little bit. And it's not just this other person that you're seeing another side of, they're also seeing another side of you. Now, does this mean that you should hide that part of yourself away? No, you shouldn't. It means that this is a relationship that maybe needs to slow down a little bit because it's moving, well, for most of March at a pace that's a little too quickly. And then by the time Mercury begins to hit its retrograde motion, I'm going to get the date for that for you right here, mid-month around the 15th, then it begins to be a space where you're beginning to review the pace at which things are developing. But this is an important connection for you. It's one that shouldn't be necessarily discounted or done away with. It's just that as the relationship goes on, you're seeing more of the true nature of the other individual. They're seeing more of your true nature. You're liking some things that you're seeing, you're not liking other things that you're seeing. So let it develop a little more slowly. Let's see what March 2025 has in store for you, Capricorn. Friends, lend me your ear. No, I don't think I'll do that. If I lent you my ear, then I wouldn't have it on my head. And I really just kind of want to keep it on my head because it's mine and it belongs to me. So, no, you can't have it. So, yeah, I know that's maybe just a little bit silly, but really, is it that silly? I mean, look at all those different people that you give your ear to, whether you're giving your ear, and I mean like, listening to somebody based on their philosophies or ideas and trying out those particular ideas for yourself, or whether or not you've got somebody who's going, I need for you to do this, we need for you to do that. Whoa, 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 let's just kind of slow down a little bit. So, first of all, in March, Capricorn, there is absolutely nothing wrong with placing your own priorities first over and above anything else. As a matter of fact, it's somewhat recommended, right? It can be confusing this particular month to kind of understand where your loyalties lie and those loyalties that you're really just kind of having to sort through. It's got you confused and befuddled, and there's just too many loose ends for you to tie up, and it's got you placed in a position where ultimately you're going to trip over yourself if you're not careful. So, the best thing to do is to kind of go, well, wait a second, where is my philosophy, my beliefs, my ethics in relation to all of this, and focus on that first and foremost. What feels right to you is not necessarily what feels right to another person. What another person wants you to do, unless of course it's a necessity, may not be what you want to do for your own life. And there's a lot of activity taking place over the course of March for you, Capricorn, in your third house. Some of you might be considering traveling, but trying to pick your destination and perhaps a little bit confused with that. On a simpler level, there's probably a lot of decisions that you're needing to make on where you want to direct your energy and your effort going forward. And what's really great is we have, a lot of planets crossing over Neptune, is imagination holds really key in this particular area. And it's really important over the course of March that you become more devoted to your creative inspiration. You're going to have, Mercury and Venus both retrograding through your house of security, stability, And so likely you're going to be in a position where you're trying to map out a new way forward, but one that's equally more inspired and based upon your own ideas, beliefs, philosophies, and being more secure with that. And in addition to that, it's likely going to place you in a position where you're recognizing that you deserve to be happy too. And sometimes when we're making those particular decisions, then we have to prioritize what's important to us over and above what other people want us to do. That being the case, even though Capricorns have this reputation with the rest of the zodiac of somewhat being cold and detached and focused on success, they don't know you too well, Capricorn, because feelings are of utmost importance to you. But just occasionally, you can focus your mind on things that are going to make your life more materially stable, and that equally takes care of your own inner feelings too, your own inner happiness, right? You know, on a certain level, they say money can't buy you happiness, and that's true. But sometimes when we get focused on something and we become devoted in a particular direction, inspiration begins to pick up, things begin to flow much more smoothly. And yes, sometimes a lot of the problems that are going on in our life are based upon feeling that we're not stable enough materially in order to have that inner level of happiness and security that we really like. So, yes, while I hold that inner security and inner worth are much more important than net worth, sometimes the two can go hand in hand, and you can make your life a lot happier over the course of March if you focus in the direction on what's going to make your future much more stable. Hello there, Aquarius. Welcome to your March 2025 horoscope. Wouldn't it be great if when we were younger, we were taught that the amount of money you have has absolutely nothing to do with how worthy of a human being you are? We seem to learn the contrasting point of view to that and have it really kind of rubbed in our faces most of our lives. And let's face it, it's not really true. Just because you have money, it doesn't mean you're a great person, right? You can be a horrible person, of course, and have money. And just because you don't have money, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. So then we should really understand that greater self-worth is something that is absolutely much more valuable than net worth is. And I know you may be sitting there going, yeah, but I need some money. But there's a point to all of this, and there is most likely for a lot of Aquarians some financial uncertainties that are going on, like the last month, February, and yes, on into March. And it has you taking a look at this concept of net worth versus greater self-worth. So the good thing about self-worth is once we really very firmly establish it, there's nothing or no one that can come along and actually take that away from us unless we let them, right? It's much more solid, it's much more stable. But with net worth, all that it takes is fluctuations in economy, fluctuations in what's going on in your life, some unlike recognized expense, and the next thing you know, boom, things are suddenly dipping down to a really low level. And if your self-worth is wrapped up in how much you have, boom, there goes your self-worth as well. Right? And that's something you don't want to have happen. And if that's something that's already happening to you, that's something you need to be working on with March. Let's face it, you've been actually in a position where you've been, well, for lack of a better way to put it, forced to take on a lot more responsibility lately. A lot of you may be coming out of connections with other people where there was a mutually supportive connection, not necessarily just in the realm of finances, but in terms of everything else. And now you're in a space where you're having to take on a lot more responsibility. And as you've been doing that, bearing that weight has placed you in a position where, like, you've been kind of tested. You've been having to take a look at your emotional grit. You've been having to take a look at your mental muscles, and you've been having to really develop greater spiritual stamina. And criticism may have initially caused you to doubt yourself as you were kind of traversing your way through this, but more fully with each day that comes, you're beginning to kind of emerge out of your shell. Let's talk about that shell because that's the first time I've mentioned that. Is, basically when we're not feeling confident in ourselves, when we're not feeling that we can handle things, we tend to kind of hide ourselves behind a mask. And there's a lot of unmasking going on for everybody in March because we have a lot of planets that are transiting through Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra. But what's happening with you is you're discovering greater and greater levels of confidence within yourself that's placing you in a position where you actually recognize that the things that you've been kind of hiding, you don't really need to hide those anymore. You're recognizing that you're not some 90-pound weakling that can't shoulder the burden that you're being asked to shoulder. As a matter of fact, you're quite capable of handling it. And so here's the really interesting thing. Net worth does not determine self-worth, of course, but greater self-worth can help you to develop greater net worth. So always focus on developing greater stability within self. You may be on a certain level not really sure where everything is heading with your life, and but you're becoming much more certain of who you are. And that's what's ultimately most important. Welcome to your monthly horoscope for the month of March 2025, Pisces. So this is birthday month for some of you, so I'll say a brief happy birthday. Of course, don't worry, I'm not going to sing, but what a powerful way to kind of step into your birthday month. Why am I saying that? Okay, let's explore this a little bit more. Quite a lot of you are closing the door on key relationships in your life. And as you begin to do so, much more powerfully so, in the month of March, well, it simultaneously seems really exciting to you, and on the other hand, pretty scary. Quite often, relationships provide us with a sense of security. In some instances where joint resources are being shared, they can provide us with a sense of stability. And that's an important one as it relates to your particular horoscope because it seems like financial liquidity is kind of tying into you being placed in a position where you're having to accept greater responsibility and greater accountability for yourself. And so, as you begin to head into this fresh and unknown territory, it seems, well, a little bit frightening. For some of you, this may not have anything to do with intimate relationships. For some of you, it may have something to do with a business relationship or a relationship to a family member. In either instance, there's a big change on the cards for you in the month of March, Pisces. Sorry, got tongue twisted there. We have Venus that is going to be stationing and going into retrograde motion in your house of finances. And Venus also kind of ties in with that whole concept of joint resources shared with another. And then we have in the middle of the month, all within a day of each other, we're going to have a total lunar eclipse in your house of relationships. For some of you, there may be things coming to the surface around either your inner child in a connection with another person, or for some of you who have children, and children might be tying into this shift in relationships, that might be coming to the surface in terms of how you can play the role of being both your own best parent for yourself and equally for the child jointly with the other individual. For some of you, this may have to do with a creative project as well. But what's happening at the same time is the following day of the eclipse, we're going to have the sun forming a harmonious alignment with Uranus. Uranus is in a section of the sky that's called Kritika Nakshatra. And Kritika is geared towards burning away and purifying those things that no longer work. And as you begin to kind of shift gears more into self-oriented mode in March, Pisces, you're likely going to find yourself burning away a lot of the memories of the past, things that didn't work in the past, and getting rid of those things as you're beginning to explore fresh territory. And this is equally a very powerful month for you from the perspective that your ruler, Neptune, is getting ready to shift signs for the first time in 13 years. And it's going to be shifting into your house of responsibility, family. Family is a second house matter too, and finances. And so it's likely going to bring your attention to those particular areas. Some of you may find yourself kind of reflecting back on poignant moments within the relationships that you might be walking away from. And we can have that even if it's a business relationship. But at this particular time, rather than reflecting too much on the past, it's better that you confront your fears and embrace your newly found power, because this is really an exciting time for you. And doing so can equally lead to greater external prosperity.